The morning Marcus Carter woke up, he already knew what was going to happen. Not the exact words. Not the exact face. But he knew, the way a man who has lived inside his skin for 43 years knows, that before he reached his seat on that plane, someone was going to make him feel like he didn't belong there. He had felt it before. In courtrooms. In boardrooms. In restaurants where the host suddenly couldn't find a reservation that was clearly in the system. He had learned to recognize the particular stillness that came before those moments. The way the air changed just slightly, like the pressure dropping before a storm. He showered, dressed in his charcoal Tom Ford suit, and looked at himself in the mirror of the hotel bathroom. He had flown in from Washington the night before. His brother Elijah was already downstairs, waiting with 2 coffees and a calm smile that could slow a racing heart. "You ready?" Elijah asked, handing him the cup. "More than you know," Marcus said. They took a car to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 6:45 in the morning, checked their bags at the premium desk, and made their way to gate D14 with 40 minutes to spare. First-class tickets. Seats 2A and 2B. Everything in order. The gate agent's name was Sandra Holloway. She was in her mid-40s, hair pulled into a tight bun, a lanyard heavy with ID cards swinging against her chest. She was talking to a colleague when the brothers approached the desk to confirm their boarding passes. A routine step, nothing more. But the moment Sandra looked up and her eyes moved across Marcus and Elijah, something shifted in her expression. It was small. Most people would have missed it. Marcus didn't miss it. He never did. "Can I help you?" she said. The tone was not hostile. Not yet. It was the specific flatness of someone who has already decided an interaction is going to be a problem before it has begun. "Just confirming our boarding passes," Elijah said pleasantly, sliding both across the counter. "Seats 2A and 2B. Sandra picked them up slowly. She scanned them once, then again. Then she placed them on the counter and folded her hands over them in a way that was almost territorial. "I'm going to need to verify these," she said. "Of course," Marcus said. She typed something, looked at the screen, typed again. A full minute passed. The line behind them was growing. A white couple in matching linen shirts walked up to the adjacent desk, flashed their phones at a different agent, and were waved through in under 20 seconds. Marcus watched this without expression. "There seems to be an issue with your tickets," Sandra said. "What kind of issue?" Elijah asked. "A seating conflict. These seats may have been double-booked." "We purchased these tickets 6 weeks ago," Marcus said, his voice unhurried. "First class." Both confirmed. "I understand that, sir, but our system is showing a conflict. I'm going to need you to step aside while I look into this." They stepped aside. They waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The gate began boarding. Zone 1 was called. Then Zone 2. Other passengers streamed past. Not once did Sandra look up to update them. She busied herself with other travelers, her fingers moving across her keyboard, her eyes doing everything except meeting theirs. When Marcus finally approached the desk again, Sandra held up one finger without looking at him. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "our zone has already been called." "I'm aware, sir. I'm still looking into your situation." "What exactly is the situation?" She finally looked up, and in that moment, something in her expression became less professional and more personal. Her jaw tightened slightly. Her eyes moved across his suit, his shoes, his face, in that order, and whatever calculation she was running, the result was visible. "Sir, I'm going to need you both to return to the check-in desk downstairs and have your identification re-verified. We have reason to believe these tickets were purchased fraudulently." The gate fell quiet. Not completely. The ambient noise of an airport never fully stops, but the people nearby heard. A woman in a yellow scarf paused mid-step. A businessman looked up from his phone. A gate agent at the neighboring desk froze. Elijah was still. Marcus was stiller. "On what basis?" Marcus asked. "It's a standard security protocol." "It is not a standard security protocol," Marcus said. "I have flown over 200 times in the last decade, and I have never once been asked to return to check-in after reaching the gate with confirmed first-class tickets." "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice." "I haven't raised it." If you continue to be disruptive, I will be forced to call security. The word disruptive landed in the air like a stone dropped into still water. Everyone heard it, and everyone who heard it understood what it really meant. Not what the word meant in a dictionary, what it meant here, in this moment, directed at these two men, in these suits, at this gate. Elijah placed one hand on his brother's arm, not to restrain him, just a touch, a signal between brothers that needed no translation. "We'll step aside," Elijah said quietly. They moved to a row of seats against the window. The plane sat visible on the tarmac beyond the glass, large and white and indifferent. Around them, the last passengers boarded. The gate door closed. Marcus sat with his hands folded in his lap, looking out at the runway. He did not look angry. He looked like a man who has just confirmed something he already suspected and is deciding, calmly and precisely, exactly what to do about it. He reached into his jacket pocket and touched the edge of a folded document he had placed there that morning before leaving the hotel. He had printed it 2 weeks ago, when the whistleblower first made contact. He had carried it every day since, waiting. He turned to Elijah. "Make the call," he said. Elijah nodded, pulled out his phone, and scrolled to a number he had saved simply as RH. He pressed dial. "If this story is already speaking to you, you are exactly where you need to be." Follow echoed truth stories for stories that tell the truth the world tries to bury. Subscribe now. The next chapter will change everything you think you know about this moment. The call connected on the second ring. Elijah didn't speak immediately. He listened to the line settle, let the ambient airport noise fill the silence, and then said 3 words in the same unhurried tone he used for everything. "It happened today." A pause on the other end. Then, "Where are you?"
Atlanta.
Gate D14. Hartsfield, Jackson. "About 10 minutes ago." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll handle it." That was the entire conversation. Elijah hung up, tucked the phone into the breast pocket of his jacket, and leaned back in the airport chair as though he had just ordered room service. Marcus watched him. He understood. He always does. What the gate agent Sandra Holloway did not know, what almost no one in that terminal knew, was who, exactly, she had just turned away from a first-class flight. Marcus Elijah Carter was not simply a well-dressed black man with expensive luggage and a confirmed ticket. He was one of the most respected civil rights attorneys in the United States. In 20 years of practice, he had argued 3 cases before the Supreme Court. He had won 2 of them. His third, a landmark class action suit against a major hotel chain for systematic racial discrimination in service delivery, was currently under review and had been covered by every major publication from the New York Times to the Financial Times. He was not famous in the way celebrities are famous. His face was not on billboards, but in every federal courthouse in the country, his name was known. He had spent his career turning moments exactly like this morning's into the kind of legal precedent that changed policies, ended careers, and cost corporations tens of millions of dollars. His brother, Elijah James Carter, was something else entirely. Where Marcus worked with words and arguments and the architecture of the law, Elijah worked with numbers, contracts, and the invisible machinery that kept large commercial operations running. 12 years ago, he had founded Carter Logistic Solutions from a single warehouse in Memphis with 7 employees and 2 trucks. Today, CLS operated in 14 states, employed over 3,000 people, and managed the ground freight coordination for some of the largest commercial entities in the country, including 2 major airline carriers. One of those carriers was Transcontinental Airways, the same airline whose logo was printed on Sandra Holloway's lanyard. The same airline whose first-class seat Marcus had just been barred from boarding. 3 years ago, Transcontinental had faced a catastrophic operational crisis. A sudden spike in fuel costs combined with a labor dispute at their primary freight handling partner had pushed the airline toward the edge of insolvency. They needed a ground logistics partner who could absorb the shortfall quickly, efficiently, and without publicity. Elijah had been recommended by a mutual contact. He had flown to their headquarters in Chicago, met with their then CFO, and within 72 hours had structured a transitional contract worth $47 million that kept the airline's cargo operations running while they stabilized. The CEO at the time had sent Elijah a handwritten note. He had framed it. It was still on the wall of his Memphis office, next to a photo of his mother. That CEO's name was Richard Holt. Holt had since moved from CFO to CEO, a promotion he received in part because the airline's miraculous stabilization during the crisis was attributed, internally, to his leadership. Elijah had never corrected that narrative publicly. He had simply renewed the contract twice and kept building. The current CLS contract with Transcontinental was valued at $62 million and was up for renewal in 4 months. None of this was visible at the gate. Sandra had seen 2 black men in suits. She had run her calculation.
She had acted on it.
But in the row of seats by the window, things were moving that she could not see or hear. While Elijah had made his call, Marcus had opened his laptop and composed 3 emails in quick succession. The first went to his paralegal in Washington, attaching a pre-drafted complaint document he had prepared 2 weeks earlier. The second went to a contact at the Federal Aviation Administration's Office of Civil Rights, a woman named Diane Okafor, who had worked with Marcus on 2 previous cases and who answered her email with unusual speed. The third went to a journalist named Patrick Mensa at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a man Marcus had known since law school, with a subject line that read only, "Today. Call me." The pre-drafted complaint was not a document Marcus had assembled hastily. It had been constructed after he received a message 14 days earlier from a former Transcontinental employee, a freight coordinator named Darnell Webb, who had been quietly let go after filing 3 internal complaints about discriminatory treatment of black passengers at high-traffic terminals. Darnell had compiled a detailed record: dates, incident numbers, names of passengers, names of staff involved. He had documented 11 separate incidents at Gate D14 over a period of 18 months. Sandra Holloway's name appeared in 7 of them. Darnell had not gone to the media. He had gone to Marcus Carter because someone had told him that if you had a case worth fighting, that was the number to call. Marcus had reviewed the documentation for a week, verified what could be verified, and then done something that surprised even his paralegal. Instead of filing immediately, he waited. He wanted a first-hand account. He wanted to walk through that gate himself, with his own ticket, and see what happened. He had not predicted it would go this far this fast. But it had. And now the machinery was already running. Across the terminal, Sandra Holloway was processing a family of 4, entirely unaware that 47 floors above her in a glass tower in Chicago, a phone call had just ended, that a calendar had been cleared, that a car was being arranged, that a man named Richard Holt had put on his jacket and said to his assistant, in a voice she had never heard before, "Get me to Atlanta." Marcus closed his laptop and looked out at the empty gate. The plane they were supposed to be on was already taxiing down the runway, growing smaller against the pale morning sky. He watched it without emotion. There would be other flights. What was coming next was not going to happen in the air. Richard Holt was not a man given to panic. In 22 years in the airline industry, he had navigated fuel crises, labor strikes, 2 attempted hostile takeovers, and a global pandemic that had nearly erased commercial aviation from the map entirely. He had developed, through necessity, a particular talent for absorbing bad news with the same even expression he used for good news, a composure his board of directors admired and his wife occasionally found unsettling. But when Elijah Carter's name appeared on his phone screen at 7:43 in the morning and he heard those 3 words, "It happened today," Richard Holt felt something he rarely felt.
Fear.
Not for himself, for what he already knew this meant. He had met Elijah Carter 6 years ago in a conference room in Memphis, where Elijah had laid out a logistic solution on a single sheet of paper that had made Richard feel, for the first time in a long while, that the airline might survive. In the years since, the 2 men had developed the kind of professional relationship that was rare in corporate America, built not on performance reviews or quarterly calls, but on a mutual directness that both men valued above almost anything else. Elijah never overstated. He never performed. When he said something, he meant exactly that thing, and nothing more. So, when he said it happened today, Richard did not ask for clarification. He knew what it referred to. Because 3 months ago, over dinner in Chicago, Elijah had told him something that had sat uncomfortably in the back of Richard's mind ever since. "There is a pattern at your D14 terminal," Elijah had said, without drama or accusation, in the same tone one might use to mention a weather forecast. "I've seen the data. Black business travelers. Specifically men. Delays, diversions, random security checks that aren't random. Someone needs to look at it." Richard had promised to investigate. He had passed the note to his head of customer experience. He had followed up once, received a response that said the matter was under review, and had allowed the momentum to dissolve under the weight of the quarterly earnings cycle. He would regret that for a long time. He told his assistant to clear his morning, called his head of legal, and was in a car to the airport within 20 minutes. In the car, he made 4 calls. The first was to his chief operating officer, who confirmed that yes, Elijah Carter and his brother had been denied boarding at gate D14 approximately 40 minutes earlier on grounds of an alleged ticket conflict, grounds that a 10-second system check confirmed were entirely fabricated. There was no conflict. There had never been a conflict. The second call was to his head of HR, instructing her to pull every complaint filed against staff at gate D14 over the past 2 years and have a summary ready within the hour. The third call was to his general counsel, who said 3 words before Richard had finished his second sentence. "I'll be there." The fourth call was to Elijah. "I'm on my way," Richard said. "I need you and your brother to stay in the terminal. Don't go anywhere." "We weren't planning to," Elijah said. "Elijah, I'm sorry. I should have. Let's talk when you get here." Meanwhile, inside the terminal, Sandra Holloway had begun her next shift hour with the efficient ease of someone who had resolved a minor problem and moved on. She had written a brief incident report, passengers refused boarding due to system ticket discrepancy, resolved at desk level, and submitted it to her supervisor, a man named Craig Fielding, who approved it without reading it and archived it in the same folder where 11 other incident reports involving gate D14 had been quietly buried over the previous 18 months. Craig Fielding had been with Transcontinental for 16 years. He had been Sandra's supervisor for 4 of them. He had received every internal complaint Darnell Webb had filed. He had also been the man who, 8 months ago, had sat in a procurement meeting and quietly argued against renewing Carter Logistics Solutions' contract, citing, in his words, a need to diversify the supplier portfolio with partners who better reflect our corporate culture. The proposal had been rejected by finance. But the sentiment had been noted. What Craig did not know was that at 8:15 that morning, the young woman at the gate D15 desk, a gate agent named Imani Graves, who had worked this terminal for 3 years and had filed 3 complaints that Craig had buried, had taken her phone out during her break and done something she had been considering for a long time. She had not posted a video. She had not gone to Instagram or TikTok or Twitter. She had opened her email, connected to a personal data network that had nothing to do with the airline systems, and sent a detailed, time-stamped written account of the morning's events to an address she had saved months ago, the tip line of an investigative journalist at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. His name was Patrick Mensah. He had already received an email from Marcus Carter 40 minutes earlier. By the time Richard Holt's car pulled into the airport's executive entrance, Patrick Mensah had spoken to both sources independently, confirmed the core facts from 2 directions, and was already drafting the opening of a story he knew was going to run above the fold. This story is not just entertainment. It is a mirror. If it made you feel something, share it. Because the truth only echoes when people pass it on. Follow Echoed Truth Stories and never miss a story that deserves to be heard. Richard Holt walked through the terminal without an entourage. He had considered bringing communication staff. His PR director had offered, in the car, to draft a holding statement. His general counsel had suggested they establish a controlled meeting room, away from public view, before any conversation took place. Richard had declined all of it. He had been in business long enough to know that the kind of damage that was already in motion could not be managed by press releases and conference rooms. The only tool he had left was honesty, and he needed to use it in the open where it counted. He spotted Marcus and Elijah exactly where Elijah had said they would be, seated by the window at gate D14, unhurried and composed, as though they had nowhere better to be. Which, of course, they did. They had a family reunion to get to. A flight they should have been on 2 hours ago. A mother in Birmingham who had made her jerk chicken from scratch and was waiting at an airport on the other end. Richard crossed the terminal toward them. He was aware of people watching. The terminal was busy. It was mid-morning now, and the foot traffic had swelled. He did not slow down. He walked directly to where they sat, stopped in front of them, and said nothing for a moment. Then he sat down. Not across from them.
Next to them.
In the adjacent seat, facing the same direction, looking out at the same tarmac. "I owe you both an apology," he said. "Not a corporate one. A personal one." Marcus looked at him. "Go ahead. 3 months ago, Elijah told me about a pattern at this terminal. I took note of it. I passed it along. And then I let it disappear into a process that clearly was not working. This morning is the result of that failure, my failure. And I am sorry." Elijah said nothing. He let the apology sit. "What happened here today was wrong," Richard continued. "Not just procedurally. Morally. Your tickets were valid. The system showed no conflict. The agent fabricated a reason to remove you from that gate. I have seen the incident report she filed. I have seen the 11 other reports connected to this desk over the past 18 months. I have also been told, in the last hour, that every one of those reports was reviewed and archived by a supervisor named Craig Fielding without action." Marcus turned to look at him fully now. "How many of those 11 reports involved black passengers?" Richard paused. "All of them." The word landed softly, but it filled the space completely. "Craig Fielding is currently being escorted from this building," Richard said. "Sandra Holloway has been suspended pending a full HR investigation. I want to be clear. I am not telling you this as a negotiation. I am not offering it in exchange for anything. I am telling you because it is the right thing to do, and because you deserve to know that this institution is taking responsibility." "Taking responsibility and being accountable are different things," Marcus said. "I know. You had a report on your desk 3 months ago. Not from a stranger. From Elijah. Someone you trust. Someone whose company keeps your cargo operation running. And it took this morning for the process to move." "Yes. That tells me the problem is not Sandra Holloway," Marcus said. "Sandra Holloway is a symptom. The problem is a culture that allowed her to behave this way for 18 months without consequence, that buried 11 complaints, that gave a supervisor the latitude to protect that behavior because it aligned with his own biases. That is a structural problem. And structural problems do not go away because one person is suspended and one supervisor is walked out." Richard nodded slowly. "What would it take, in your view, for this to be handled correctly?" "That question," Marcus said, "is going to require more than this conversation." At that moment, 2 things happened almost simultaneously. The first, a breaking news notification appeared on the phones of approximately 40,000 people in the Atlanta metro area. The headline read, "Exclusive, 2 black executives denied boarding at ATL. Airline CEO rushes to terminal." Patrick Mentz's story had gone live. The second, an elderly black woman who had been sitting 3 rows away, apparently absorbed in a novel, closed her book, stood slowly, and walked toward them. She was in her 70s, small and precise in her movements, dressed in a deep blue blazer with a single gold pin at the lapel. She stopped in front of Richard Holt and looked at him with the particular directness of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Mr. Holt," she said, "my name is Dr. Loretta James. I am a retired federal judge. I have been sitting at this gate since before these gentlemen arrived this morning." She reached into her handbag and produced her phone, screen first, showing a video file. "I recorded the entire interaction at the desk. The audio is clear. Would you like to see it before or after your legal team does?" Richard Holt looked at the phone, then at Marcus, then at Elijah. Elijah, for the first time all morning, smiled. The next 72 hours moved the way powerful things move, not with noise but with weight. Patrick Mentz's story was picked up within hours by the Associated Press, then by 3 network affiliates, then by every major newspaper in the country with a breaking news desk. By that evening, Transcontinental Airways was trending in 6 countries. By the following morning, the airline stock had dropped 4 points in pre-market trading. By the afternoon, two members of the board of directors had called Richard Holt directly, not to manage the story, but to ask what he intended to do about it. Dr. Loretta James gave one interview to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, in which she described what she had witnessed with the measured precision of someone who had spent 30 years weighing testimony. She did not editorialize. She did not perform outrage. She simply described, in exact sequence, what she had seen. It was more devastating than any opinion piece could have been. Sandra Holloway's HR file, once the internal investigation began, revealed what the buried complaints had always suggested: a pattern of selective enforcement, a history of escalating interactions specifically with black male passengers, and 3 previous warnings that had been marked resolved without documentation of any actual resolution. She was terminated. She retained a lawyer and issued a statement claiming she had been made a scapegoat. No major outlet found the argument convincing, given the recorded evidence. Craig Fielding, whose decision to archive every complaint without action now sat in the middle of a full legal review, was placed on indefinite administrative leave. His procurement lobbying notes, including the memo in which he had written that Carter Logistics Solutions did not reflect the corporate culture, had been discovered during the audit and immediately flagged by the General Counsel's office. Those notes were now in the possession of 2 people, the airline's legal team and Marcus Carter. Marcus had not gone to Birmingham for the reunion. Not yet. He had spent the first night in an Atlanta hotel, working late with his paralegal and Diane Okafor at the FAA's Office of Civil Rights, finalizing the formal complaint that would trigger a federal review of transcontinental service practices at high-traffic terminals. It was not the work of a single incident. It was the work that Darnell Webb's documentation had made possible: 11 cases, 18 months, a paper trail that was now complete and legally airtight. On the morning of the 3rd day, Marcus and Elijah sat across a conference table from Richard Holt and 3 members of his legal team. The atmosphere was civil but precise. There were no performances. No grandstanding. Marcus laid out the terms of the proposed settlement clearly and without embellishment: a financial resolution for the documented victims of the D-14 incidents, mandatory anti-discrimination training across all terminals with external oversight, the creation of an independent passenger advocacy position reporting directly to the board, and a public commitment to a timeline, not a promise, a timeline, for reviewing service records at every high-traffic gate in the system. He also placed one additional document on the table. It was a set of emails, legally obtained through a source inside a lobbying firm, documenting that Richard Holt, while serving as CFO, had quietly opposed a federal diversity in aviation bill that would have mandated exactly the kind of oversight Marcus was now proposing. The opposition had been conducted in private while the airline publicly championed inclusion in every press release it issued. Richard looked at the document for a long time. This wasn't in the original complaint, his general counsel said. No, Marcus agreed. It wasn't, because this conversation is not just about what happened at Gate D-14. It is about what created the conditions for Gate D-14 to happen at all. Culture does not grow in a vacuum. It grows from the top, from the decisions that leaders make when they think no one is watching. Richard Holt did not look away from the document. He did not attempt to explain it. After a long silence, he looked up at Marcus and said, "What do you want?" "I want what I've always wanted," Marcus said. "For this to not happen to the next man. The one who doesn't have a brother with the CEO's number. The one who doesn't have a whistleblower file or a federal judge 3 rows back. I want the system to change. Not the optics. The system." The settlement took 2 weeks to finalize. Its terms were made public, not because the airline wanted that, but because Marcus insisted on it as a condition. Transparency, he had said, was the only form of accountability that could not be quietly archived. Darnell Webb, the former employee whose documentation had made everything possible, was offered a formal acknowledgement and a resolution of his own wrongful termination claim. He took a week to respond. When he did, he said simply that he was glad someone had finally listened. Imani Graves, the gate agent who had sent the tip from her personal device during her break, was not fired. Richard Holt, in one of the few personal decisions that would later be widely praised, personally ensured she was protected. She was offered a promotion. She considered it for a month, then took it. On a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the morning at Gate D14, Marcus and Elijah Carter finally landed in Birmingham. Their mother met them at arrivals with a look on her face that was equal parts relief and exasperation and love, the specific combination that only mothers can produce. She held both of them for a long time without speaking. Then she stepped back, looked them over the way she had when they were boys coming home from school, and said, "You're late." "We had something to take care of," Elijah said. "Was it worth it?" Marcus considered the question. He thought about Darnell Webb's file. About 11 incidents buried in a folder. About the man who would come through that gate next month, and the month after that without a paralegal on standby or a judge in the third row. "Yes," he said. "It was worth it." She made the jerk chicken. They ate together late into the night. And somewhere in Atlanta, a gate that had once been a place of quiet, systematic humiliation was under new management, being watched, being documented, being held to account. Not because the world had suddenly become just, but because two men had refused to be invisible, had refused to be moved, and had understood that dignity is not given to you by the people in authority over you. It is the thing you carry in regardless. The thing no gate agent, no supervisor, no boarding denial can ever take from you. The truth had echoed. And this time, it had not faded. You made it to the end, and that means something. Stories like this one exist because people like you believe the truth deserves to be told. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Follow Echoed Truth Stories and never stop listening for the echo.